There are stories people tell for attention, and then there are stories people tell because keeping them inside becomes more dangerous than saying them out loud. What I'm about to share is not folklore. It's not a legend. It's a documented chain of events that happened inside a quiet religious residence in the United States. Events that still divide experts today. Before we begin, do one thing for me. Like this story. Share it with someone who watches late at night. Subscribe to the channel if you want real, slow-burning horror that stays with you. And in the comments, tell me, which city and country are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Because timing matters more than you think. In the spring of 2005, a woman named Sister Margaret Hale arrived at a secluded religious residence outside St. Augustine, Florida. The building sat far from highways, surrounded by marshland and long stretches of old oak trees draped in Spanish moss. The air there always felt heavier than it should, humid, still, as if sound itself slowed down before reaching the walls. Margaret had transferred from a small Midwestern community. On paper, she was everything the residents valued: disciplined, reserved, obedient, and deeply introspective. From the moment she stepped inside, she spoke very little. Not out of arrogance, not out of fear. Silence seemed natural to her, like a language she had already mastered. The other residents noticed it within days. Margaret was always present, but never noticeable. If everyone gathered in one room, someone would eventually whisper, "Where's Margaret?" And the unsettling part? She was usually standing right there. She performed her daily responsibilities flawlessly. She helped in the kitchen. She assisted newcomers. She attended every service. But when conversation flowed, she faded. No arguments, no laughter, no casual exchanges. She spent hours alone in the chapel long after others had left, watching, listening, waiting. By early summer, concern replaced curiosity. A senior caretaker, Elaine Porter, finally approached the resident supervisor. "There's nothing wrong with her work," Elaine said carefully. "But she's absent. It's like she's somewhere else, even when she's standing right in front of you." The supervisor, Father Daniel Reeves, listened without interrupting. Daniel was a man of routine and logic. He didn't believe in jumping to conclusions. Emotional isolation wasn't uncommon in people devoted to quiet lives. Still, he agreed to observe. Margaret lived in a narrow room at the far end of the east wing. That hallway was always colder than the rest of the building. Late one evening, Father Daniel decided to check on her personally. As he approached the door, he slowed his steps. Voices were coming from inside. Not loud, not angry, conversational. Daniel hesitated, then knocked. No response. He opened the door. Margaret sat alone at her desk. Her lips were moving. She was mid-sentence, but the room contained no one else. Daniel stood frozen. Margaret didn't look at him. She continued speaking, pausing occasionally, as if listening. Her expressions changed subtly. Confusion, then recognition, then something dangerously close to amusement. Finally, she turned. "Oh," she said calmly. "I didn't hear you come in." Daniel asked the only question he could. "Who were you talking to?" Margaret smiled. "You wouldn't understand." That night, Daniel told himself what everyone tells themselves first: stress, isolation, imagination. He said nothing to the others, but he didn't sleep. Over the following days, more incidents surfaced. Margaret responding to questions no one asked, pausing mid-task to listen to empty space, smiling at nothing. Then came the service. During a morning service, as the room sat in absolute stillness, Margaret began to laugh. Not quietly, not nervously. She laughed loudly, sharply, like she'd just heard the most obscene joke imaginable. Every head turned. Father Daniel felt his stomach drop. This wasn't stress. This wasn't imagination. This was something else. After the incident during the morning service, silence stopped being protection. Father Daniel called a private meeting that same afternoon. Margaret sat across from him, hands folded neatly in her lap. Calm, composed, almost relieved to finally be addressed. "People are concerned," Daniel said carefully. "They're afraid." Margaret tilted her head slightly. "Of what?" she asked. "Of what you're experiencing." She smiled again, that same restrained smile. "He's always here," she said. "Why would they be afraid now?" Daniel felt his throat tighten. "Who is he?" Margaret looked past him, toward the far corner of the room. "You still don't see him?" By evening, the residence was split. Some believed Margaret was under severe psychological distress. Others whispered that something had attached itself to her. The debate grew intense, but quiet. Fear has a way of lowering voices. One caretaker, Ruth Calder, spoke up. "We need a medical evaluation," she said firmly. "Not speculation." Others hesitated. "What if we're wrong?" someone whispered. "What if this isn't medical?" Father Daniel listened to both sides. Then he made a decision. Margaret would be evaluated by an outside specialist. For now, she would remain under observation. The evaluation happened quickly. The specialist's conclusion was cautious, but hopeful. Acute psychological stress, possible dissociation, no immediate danger. For a short while, Margaret improved. She slept. She spoke more. She laughed at appropriate moments. The residents relaxed. People wanted to believe it was over. They always do. 3 weeks later, Margaret didn't show up for morning duties, then not for lunch. By afternoon, concern returned, sharper this time. Ruth went to Margaret's room. As she approached the door, she stopped. Sounds were coming from inside. Violent sounds. A sharp impact. Then another. Ruth opened the door. Margaret stood facing the wall. Her forehead struck the surface again and again. Blood streaked downward, painting the pale surface in chaotic lines. Her voice cracked as she repeated the same phrase over and over. "I don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve to be here." When she noticed Ruth's presence, she stopped instantly, wiped her face with her sleeve, then smiled. "He's back," she whispered. "You should stay. He likes you." From that night forward, the building changed. Screams echoed after midnight. Laughter followed, low and distorted. No one walked the East Wing alone anymore. Margaret's voice could be heard speaking softly from behind closed doors, sometimes arguing, sometimes pleading, sometimes laughing. Father Daniel knew the situation had surpassed containment. Something had to be done. A final meeting was called. Margaret sat restrained, not by force, but by necessity. She didn't resist. She leaned forward and whispered to Daniel. "He says tonight is the last chance." Daniel felt a chill spread through him. Whether this was illness or something else no longer mattered. They believed intervention was the only option left. And once the choice was made, there was no turning back. The room chosen for Margaret was deep inside the East Wing, windowless, narrow, and heavy with still air. A single overhead light flickered faintly. Margaret was placed on the bed at the center of the room. Soft restraints were used, justified as precaution. She didn't fight them. In fact, she seemed relieved. As the door closed, she exhaled slowly. "You finally listened," she said. Father Daniel stood at the foot of the bed. "To who?" he asked. Margaret turned her head toward the ceiling. To him, the first night was unbearable, but survivable. Margaret screamed, then cried, then laughed. Her voice shifted constantly, pleading one moment, mocking the next. At times, she spoke in whispers so soft the caretakers leaned closer, convinced they'd missed something important. At other times, she shouted accusations at no one visible. By morning, everyone involved looked exhausted. Margaret looked peaceful. She smiled as if she'd slept deeply. "He stayed the whole night," she said. "Did you feel him watching?" No one answered. By the second day, time lost meaning. Margaret stopped screaming. She stopped struggling. She stared, unblinking, at a fixed point near the ceiling. Hours passed without movement. Caretakers debated quietly. Was this improvement or surrender? Then, without warning, Margaret began speaking again. Not to them, to something closer. "I did everything you asked," she said calmly. "Why are you still here?" She paused, listened. Her breathing changed. "No," she whispered. "I won't do that." The light flickered. Someone swore they felt the temperature drop. By the third night, Margaret was barely conscious. Her lips were cracked, her voice hoarse. Still, she spoke. "He says you waited too long." Those were the last clear words she formed. Hours later, the room fell silent. No crying, no laughter, just breathing. Slow, shallow, fading. When Father Daniel finally ordered the restraints removed, Margaret didn't respond. Her pulse was weak. An ambulance was called immediately. Emergency intervention began en route. It wasn't enough. Margaret Hale was pronounced dead before reaching the hospital. The official cause listed complications from prolonged physical and psychological stress. The residence was investigated. Statements were taken. The caretakers and Father Daniel were charged. Court proceedings dragged on for years. Justice, depending on who you ask, was served. But the story didn't end there. Months later, Margaret's brother gave a single interview. His words reopened everything. "She used to tell me someone followed her," he said, "long before any of this happened." When asked what he believed caused her death, he hesitated. "I don't know," he admitted. "But once, I saw her talking to something that wasn't there." The case remains debated. Was Margaret suffering from a severe psychological disorder, untreated, misunderstood, mishandled? Or did belief itself give shape to something darker? No final answer exists. And maybe that's the most terrifying part. Because the next time someone tells you they see something, no one else can. You'll have to decide what you believe. If this story unsettled you, ask yourself why. And remember, not everything unseen is imaginary, and not everything believed is unreal. Tell me in the comments, do you want more stories like this, exploring the line between the mind and the unknown? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because some stories are safer told out loud.